Meet Bob Olson. Bob's the author of Answers About the Afterlife and the host of Afterlife TV, a private investigator who began investigating life after death in 1999. Bob now records his interviews with experts, authors, and people who've had extraordinary experiences so he can share it all with you. Enjoy the show.
Of you who are longtime fans of Afterlife TV, you might recognize Lani. We interviewed her the first time. I don't know how long ago that was, but about this particular book and the work that she does. I'm going to try to get that there in your frame. No one has to die alone. I remember last time I said, no one has to die. I got that wrong. No one has to die alone. Preparing for a meaningful death. This book really is for everyone, and the reason is because each one of us is going to die. Each one of us knows someone who's going to die. We may actually experience the dying process with some of those people, and half the book is about that process. And the part one of it is a part one and a part two. And part one, I think this is important. That's why I'm saying it. Is about making a difference through illness, dying, and death. And then part two is after the person has passed, making a difference through bereavement. This book covers it all. I recommended last time that everybody go out, grab a book, read it, buy a copy for every one of their loved ones. And some people actually did that and said what a difference it made. It brought up this conversation about death and dying. So we're going to welcome her back. Dr. Lani Leary, thanks for coming back to Afterlife TV.
Thank you. My pleasure to be with you.
I'll tell you, I remember, last time it was towards the end of the interview, and I said, we got to bring you back and talk about your near-death experience, and here we are, we're doing that finally.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm excited about it. Tell us a little bit about your background, a little bit about your work.
Well, I think I talked about it a little bit in the first interview. I do this work. I was led to this work early because my mother died when I was 13. And it was such a profound and life-changing experience for me. And the grief was so overwhelming and unanswered that in order to cope, I had to find some meaning. I had to make meaning out of it. And so I vowed, I remember clearly at the age of 13, saying to myself that something good was going to come of this. And so I spent, my formative years learning everything that I could about death, dying, and grief in order to understand my own process, but also to be able to pass that on and touch others so that the dying would be different and the grief would be different. I never wanted anyone else to feel the kind of profound confusion and despair that I did as I was grieving. So I did go back to graduate school and earned my Ph.D. in counseling and psychology, and specifically did all my work around death and dying, and then developed a program in death studies and taught that, and have I've been taught by thousands of others as they were dying what was important to them. So I worked in 9 hospices across the United States and was with patients and their families as they were going through that transition. And they were really my teachers, my mentors, showing me, being so generous, really, and letting me into the most intimate and vulnerable time of their life. And I pass on what they taught me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what I love about this, because we'll transition into you telling us about your near-death experience, and it sort of comes full circle right back to where you just started, because the near-death experience then really allowed you to connect with these people as they were going through the dying process in a way that if you had not had it, you wouldn't have been able to connect with a lot of them, right?
I think that I certainly would have been able to connect with the grief.
Yeah.
And of course we grieve before we die. That's called anticipatory grief. But as a person is dying, many, many things are being lost. Roles are being lost. Physical strength is being lost. Sometimes relationships are lost. Hope for future dreams can be lost. So I would have been able to connect with them about their grief. But what the near-death experience changed for me was that there wasn't any fear on my part of being with people as they were dying, because there is nothing to fear, because death is such an illusion. I didn't need to talk about my experience with most people who were dying, because there was just a sense of there was an ability to be with them in a way that really communicated there's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and they have experiences, spiritual, whatever you want to call them, otherworldly experiences as well, and that you were able to sort of relate to because of this near-death experience.
Well, and I was able to validate for them.
Yeah.
Because so many people feel as though they're crazy when they're seeing deceased loved ones in the room with them, and the family members don't have the same experience of that, and it's difficult to validate and support that, and to be able to be told, of course they're here for you.
Yeah.
Of course you're seeing them, is one of the most comforting things in the world for a person who's dying. But also afterward, I was able to have conversations with people who were grieving the death of their loved one. And I would ask open, direct questions such as, have you had an experience of your loved one since they've died? And most people's response to me, I mean, I would say 86% of people respond in such a way that says, thank you for asking me, because no one will talk to me about this experience, and I know I heard their voice, or I know I felt their touch on my cheek. And again, to be able to validate for that person is one of the most comforting, calming, reassuring things that we can do for someone who's in grief.
Yeah. And nowadays, you know, I think there's more and more people who are opening up to this sort of thing, and a little bit have greater awareness, more doctors and nurses and that sort of thing. But
Yes.
But how long have you been doing this work?
Oh, 30 years.
Yeah, so you've seen it when, boy, I mean, it was a little bit taboo to even discuss it, right?
Oh, it was very taboo. And you can imagine being, you know, a psychologist and a professor and talking about these experiences was pretty risky in the early days. I had to be very careful of, really discern who was ready or open to exploring this.
Yeah, that's right. I was just reading recently a little bit about Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her experience, and and how she actually wanted to talk about an experience that she had that in the back of her famous book on death and dying, and that, you know, she was talked out of it because she figured nobody would ever publish it if she had.
Right, and when she did speak about it, she was very discredited.
And you know, it was funny because they were talking about, like, this was the fall of Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Exactly.
You know, I never thought of it that way. You know, I was like, man, this woman has courage. I never thought of it that way, but from an academic place and certainly in terms of science and everything, I can see how that was their view of it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you were probably much more aware of it. You were aware of it, you know, while this stuff was going on, I imagine.
I was aware of what?
What was going on with her at that time? I mean, you were probably more aware of it than I certainly was.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I was down in one of the hospices in Virginia when she was there. And I mean, people were, she was trying to do very, very important work with children with AIDS. And she was, you know, they wanted to boot her out of town. It was very sad.
Well, here we are, a less risky, living in a less risky time for you to be able to tell your story. Let's do it. I know this all started with a dentist visit. Who knew, right? Who could have expected that? A dentist visit. Tell us about your near-death experience, how it started, and what took place.
Yeah. Well, I was going for a routine dental procedure, and I was almost 29 years old, happily married, and had a beautiful 2.5-year-old baby, and just took myself to the dentist for a regular procedure. And I was in the dentist chair and given nitrous oxide, laughing gas.
Yep.
And the first thing I knew, I was lying back in the dentist chair, and the next thing I knew, I was up in the corner of the room looking down at my inert body, and I felt no fear. I felt no anxiety. And as I looked at my body, I really felt a fondness for it. I knew this body, but I knew that I was not that body. And I felt an old familiarity with it, but as though it was ready to be tossed off and go to the Salvation Army.
Wow.
It was well used and well loved. But I didn't need it back. I didn't want it back. But the dentist was frantically working on me, and I was trying to communicate. I was trying to talk to the dentist. The dentist didn't hear me. And I just looked at my body with kind of a fond detachment. And I had no sense of time, so I don't know how long I was up there in the corner of the room.
Yeah.
But the next thing that I was aware of was that I was entering a tunnel, and my mother, who had been dead for 15 years, was right at the entrance to the tunnel with her arms out. Oh. And she was whole, and she was beautiful, vibrant, and healed. She was healed, and that was really important because she did not die whole and vibrant and thriving in this way. Yeah. And I saw her, and I knew it was her, and I went into her, and I was not able to say goodbye when she died. She died suddenly and unexpectedly. And I communicated with her telepathically, so it was as though I thought and she received, and she thought and I received. I heard it inside of this being, whatever this I was now. Right. And I said to her, "I love you." And she said, "I know," in such a way that the energy went around me like her arms. And I said, "I miss you." And she said, "I know." And what I knew in that communication was that all those things every single day of my life that I had wanted to tell her or I had wanted to ask her, I already had. What I knew is that she had always been with me, and there had never been any separation between us. And I knew that she knew that I loved her. And all those years I had felt so guilty that I had not been able to say goodbye. And I was 13 years old and a typical teenager, wanting distance and independence. And I had felt so guilty, as though really there was a part of my 13-year-old brain that felt so despair doesn't even come close to it, but as though she had died believing that her only daughter didn't love her because I had told her that. So in this moment of communication, that was healed. And I knew that she would always be with me, and I still know that. I know that now. I know she's right here. So the next thing I was aware of was that I was going into this tunnel, and I had to go through this tunnel because I could see a speck of light, and it was as though I was a magnet, and I was drawn to this light. There was no question that I was going toward it. And I was in this tunnel that was so beautiful and magnificent. As I close my eyes now, I can see it and feel it. And it was an opalescent blue, like there was mother of pearl all around this tunnel. And as I went through this tunnel, I heard the most magnificent music. And I went closer and closer to the light, and the light got bigger and bigger and brighter, as though I was looking at the sun, but there was no pain in looking at this light. And I was in front of the light, and then I was aware that the light was all around me, just like my mother's arms. And then I was in the light, and I was the light. As though there was no separation between a drop of water and the ocean. It was one and the same. And I knew I was home. I was home. And I experienced, I felt, and I knew a love with a capital L that I had never experienced on earth, this unconditional love, so that I knew that I was forgiven for anything I thought I couldn't be forgiven for.
Wow.
I was one and the same. I belonged, and I was loved beyond measure. And I wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And the next thing I was aware of was that the light, and you can call the light whatever you want because it is beyond name. The light said to me in the same way that my mother and I communicated, you must go back. And I yelled with whatever force I had, no! And the light said again, you have work to do. You must go back. And I still yelled, no! And then I felt myself churning back through this tunnel, almost like I was in a blender. And I could say it was emotionally, physically, my experience was that it was almost, painful to come back. And then the next thing I knew, I was back in the dentist chair.
All right.
And my life changed.
I bet it did. And tell me, I how did the dentist react? I just find it kind of curious.
Yeah. Well, this was back in 1981, 82, and the dentist. I think that the dentist believed, we didn't talk about it. The dentist believed that he had resuscitated me. That's fine.
Yep.
And he just wanted to make sure that I was able to drive home.
Yeah.
And I did.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he had ever had that experience before, and certainly I hadn't. I'd never spoken with anyone who had that experience. I didn't have the language.
Right.
And so I didn't talk about it for years and years afterward, although my husband knew immediately that something had happened to me.
Oh, he did? How did he know?
I don't know, just by...
Oh, he just knew.
Something had shifted, something had...
Well, yeah. And some things had changed for you in terms of... there were things about your life that you just decided to do differently?
I'm not even sure I decided. I just knew they had to be different. In the same way that I had to go toward the light. My life was going to be different, though I didn't really understand how. I had received this message that I had work to do. I didn't have a clue what that meant. Yeah. And there was a sense when I got back of that this, I remember saying to myself or out loud, this better be good, because I'm missing out on being there. And it wasn't that I didn't want to be here. And certainly it wasn't that I didn't want to be with my family, my child, my husband. But I didn't know what could be more important than being in the midst of that love.
Yeah.
And so when I came back, it was a couple months afterward that I remember clearly reading the morning newspaper, turning the page and seeing a full page article about hospice, and the word, or again, the energy just came up off the page, and it was a big yes. And I knew instantly that that's what I was to do. And I took myself into a local hospice and said, I am to work here. And I've been doing that work ever since.
Really? And how do they respond?
There are people who are there always in our path to help us do what we're to do. And when I took myself in, the hospice nurse that interviewed me, she made it happen. I don't understand.
Well, it sort of goes along, people, you can call it intuition, your gut feeling, whatever. When you follow that, life just seems to flow, doesn't it?
It does. It does. When you really listen to that voice inside.
Yeah. And when we ignore it is when we often run into obstacles. Because we're trying to make something happen that maybe isn't supposed to happen, or just isn't the right time.
Right.
All right, let's dissect your story a little bit. You covered a lot, and so I'm going to ask some questions. Maybe you'll have answers to these, maybe you won't. But what I love about your particular near-death experience is it has all the elements of your typical near-death experience, right? I mean, there was hovering in the over the ceiling, going through the tunnel, being greeted by loved ones on the other side. It had a lot of the typical stages, and yet with any near-death experiences, near-death experience, each one is different. Each one is unique in itself, and a lot of it, I think, has to do with your own interpretation, and your own interpretation is based on your belief systems, all this sort of thing, what you're expecting to happen, and maybe it's a little bit of a shock to you that you're even there, but each person seems to be a little different for whatever that reason really is, and so I like to sort of ask some of the same questions to people in these interviews to sort of find out what their answer would be to it. Now, so often we all hear about hovering up at the ceiling. You didn't actually, did you experience leaving your body? It sounds like you just were there.
Right. So that's an important point. I did not experience any of the trauma of my heart stopping.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important piece. And when I work with people in particularly hospice, but when I work with the families of people who are dying, it is important to know that what we see and experience of our loved one, perhaps even the death rattle, or looking as though they're agitated, what we see is not necessarily what they experience. And that's a really important point, because I experienced no pain, no anxiety, no trauma in the moment of death.
Right.
And it's not even, there's no part of that that's a memory for me.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's important is, yes, I was still in the room after my heart stopped.
Right.
And so I try to keep the room of the person who's dying very serene.
Yep.
I want to say low drama, but just really a very sacred space, and to continue to relate and connect with the loved one. And so to talk to the person as though they're still in the room.
Yeah, right.
Because I was in the room. And then the other thing is the thing that I didn't have an ownership of my body. It was just a vehicle. It was an old car.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for the body that I inhabited, and I used it well, but it's not who I was.
Yeah.
It's not who I am now.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, I mean, you're only 29 years old, so, and you sort of referred to it earlier about, sort of being, worn out, like kind of like, right?
Yeah.
It had been through a lot, obviously, but that was the way you're perceiving it as, boy, this body's been through a lot, right?
Yeah, and really how different it would be for us as loved ones to look at this body and just to be grateful for it.
Yeah.
And I want to say that's what the deceased are also feeling.
Yeah.
Just thank you. And how different we can make that experience if we come at it from that perspective.
That's right. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And even as you're observing it, like you said, you're observing, the body's going through something. The dentist is trying to resuscitate you, but you're not feeling any of that.
I'm not feeling it.
The spirit has left the body, and not experienced any of this. And so you're hovering up at the ceiling, and we hear this all the time, up at the ceiling. So many times I hear they're in the corner of the room. Were you in the corner? Whereabouts were you in the ceiling?
My experience was that I was up in the corner of the room.
And I hear this. I don't know why that is, but whatever. Who knows? Yeah. One of those questions we might never have answered. But you're up there. I know that you explained how you felt about your body. I had read something that you wrote that you also felt something for the dentist, and you felt a lot of compassion for him, and something that either you said and was transcribed, or that you wrote, which was in your book. I'm not sure, but you actually seem to feel more compassion for him.
Yes, because he was so Oh, he was scared and agitated, and I was really trying to communicate, I'm okay, I'm okay, it's okay, it's all okay.
Isn't that beautiful?
And he couldn't, receive it.
No, right. And now some
Which
people,
isn't, but I want to add that too, that I think that there is so much communication to us, and I think that we might block it because of either our grief,
yeah,
our fear, our agitation. And so there is help coming to us.
yeah,
But just because we can't perceive it doesn't mean it's not there.
yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah.
All right, so no fear at all during this
No.
hovering experience.
No fear and no shock, Bob. So you had used the word shock. I felt
Yeah.
no shock that I was there. I felt more of a wonder that, and again, gratitude. And this is so beautiful and really almost kind of an adventure.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I get to go to Europe for the first time. Yeah.
I love that. Well, this is, great. A wonderful, peaceful experience. And then there's that transition to the tunnel. Now, how about that? Just like you explained about your body, you just seemed to be in the corner of the ceiling. How about the transition to the tunnel? Was there any kind of a transition experience, or were you just sort of there?
Yes, I was aware. I was there, and I was at it felt to me like the entrance of the tunnel, and my mother was right at the entrance of the tunnel to catch me. It felt like she was there to catch me, as though her arms were open wide, and it was a peaceful landing, I might say.
Yeah.
But right into the bosom of your mother. What else could I? It was so clearly a healing moment for me.
Yeah.
What I had needed for all those years.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And you tell a great story in your book about one of the last confrontations, but one of the last interactions that you had with your mother.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't the most positive thing that you did in terms of human perspective.
Yes.
Obviously, we know from her spiritual perspective, she wasn't worried about it at all.
Mm-hmm.
But for the healing benefit to have this experience and to be able to communicate with her in the way that you did is amazing. Now, one of the things I love, and our audience who are familiar with other videos, interviews that I've done, I talk a lot about sometimes the past life experience. If you've had a regression and you go through a past life. And one of the things that I've always remembered, and it was amazing to me, was that we gain this knowing. And so even when I'm telling the regressionist about something that is taking place, there's so much more that I'm aware of. And in your particular case, you're talking about, your mother, you said 3 things to her, and 3 times she just said, I know, to you. And yet there was so much more communication around that, right?
Yes, I really felt as though I was downloaded with a wisdom that I can't even put into words.
Yeah.
And I felt that same way, downloaded with love and wisdom in the presence of this light.
You knew all that you needed to know from her.
I did. And I still do. It's distilled into a presence rather than even a language.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love the sound of the bird in the background. Oh, it's beautiful. And the luscious greenery behind you, I should let everybody know. I'm sitting with 2 feet of snow outside my door here in Maine, and you're in Hawaii.
Right.
We can see
I'm
what
in
it's
heaven.
like there.
Yes.
The contrast of life. Well, this is beautiful. So now you're in the tunnel. You've had this experience with your mom. I know that when it was time to leave her, I know from other things that you somehow were ready to let her go. Talk about that, and how can you explain that?
Well, yeah, now that I would say is still surprising, and it's surprising to my ego, my personality, even now, because before I had this experience, if someone had said to me, if you could have any miracle in your life, what would it be? And it would be to see my mother again. And if they said to me, well, what would you say to her if you had this opportunity? My response would be, well, do I have 15 years? Because I have 15 years worth of questions and experiences I want to share with her. I want to tell her about my first date and my marriage and my child. And I mean, so many questions. So it's so surprising to me that when I did have the opportunity to be with her and to say anything, to ask anything, that I really only needed to say three things. And that was from the soul level, I think, not from the personality level, because again, what was downloaded was this wisdom of everything that you've needed to ask has been answered. Yeah. Everything that you've needed to know, you already know. Everything that you need to have confirmed is confirmed. That kind of deep knowing. Yes, it took 3 exchanges to get what I needed, and then what I knew is that to let go of my mother that's an illusion. That she had always been with me. She would always be with me. And so, yes, it was just easy to let go.
Because it wasn't a letting go.
That's not quite even the accurate way to say it. But
yeah.
I went to the light because I was pulled toward the light because I had to go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, so let's go there. So, interesting, something else. You had given a talk once for IANDS, right? Mm-hmm. Was that who it was for? And they transcribed it?
Yes.
And you were telling a story. And you were talking about, you were kind of going head first down this tunnel.
That's what it felt like.
Okay. And can you describe that? Because, at least my mind, and I imagine other people, you're kind of like, you're like this, and like you're just sort of hovering through this tunnel. I'm sure it wasn't like that. Right.
It's kind of like the Olympic toboggan experience of it maybe is a better way of describing it, saying the orientation was.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
really you're a being of light now.
I wouldn't say that I had a body. I didn't have a body. I had a perspective. I had an orientation.
Okay. That and which is great. I mean, okay, I'm glad I asked that question because that explains a lot to us. You're being drawn to it, a lot of people worry about, someone passes. This is sort of a little bit of a traumatic event. This was, we don't know for sure, right? But you're assuming you were allergic to the gas that you were given.
That's what I'm assuming. In my youth, I had never smoked. I never drank. I never took drugs. I didn't even take aspirin. I do not think it was the dentist's, error.
Yeah.
I had this shock reaction. I think my body just went, "Whoa, what is this?"
Yeah. Right. So you have this experience, but some people worry about this the inability, this maybe getting lost or those sorts of things that people talk about. Your case and many others that I've talked with who have had near-death experiences, it's you don't need a map.
No.
You're just drawn in the direction that you're supposed to go.
Yeah, and actually that's a really good metaphor because we don't need a map. We just need to follow our heart. So I would say that the magnet was kind of heart to heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And you're aware of the light at the end of the tunnel, the sort of.
Oh, very aware.
Aware of it. And what the feelings that you had, and I'm going to ask you what those are in a moment. Well, whatever, you can explain that now, but the feelings that you had from it, did they grow as you got closer to it?
The light grew as I got closer to it. So when I had just gone into the tunnel and let go of my mother, it was almost as though it was a speck of light. And then as I went through the tunnel, the light got bigger and bigger and brighter and brighter. And maybe that's a reflection of my feeling.
Yeah. Did the tunnel get bigger and
feelings,
bigger and bigger? Did the tunnel get bigger and bigger? No.
that wasn't my experience.
Yeah. Okay. And so I just have to go back a little bit. So you leave your mother. I mean, I know. I understand this is hard to explain. Okay, but did she seem like you sort of left her behind? She sort of stayed there. You went, or
no, I didn't experience that she went with me.
Yep.
But there was. See, here's the difference. When we use words like left behind.
Yeah.
The feeling that's attached to that is maybe one of fear or anxiety.
Yeah.
There was not one. Fear isn't in the vocabulary at all here.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, yeah.
But I'm really thinking more in terms of placement. You know what I mean? So, like, if we were literally in a tunnel,
Okay.
like a train tunnel or something, all right, Mom, see you later, and I'm going this way, and you stay here. I don't know where you're going, but I'm going this way. In terms of placement, is there any even comprehension of? I know there's no space, so is there any comprehension of that sort of thing, or is it just you're with her, now you're not with her?
Mm-hmm. It's the best way I can describe it is just an awareness. I was aware I was with my mother,
Yeah.
and the next thing I was aware I was moving through the tunnel,
Yep.
and the next thing I was aware that I was in this light and
Okay.
of the same energy as this light.
All right.
Uh-huh. So that's where my focus is, you see?
Yeah, and thank you for indulging me in all these silly questions.
Oh, I don't think they're silly at all. I think we're all trying to, explore and make meaning of it.
I know that you're in the arms of your mom, right? You're in the arms of her.
Mm.
Did that feeling ever go away?
No, no. It is. When people talk about going to their safe place,
Yeah.
or they're meditating,
Yeah.
I can close my eyes and go right back to that experience. I can see it. I can feel it. It is so experiential, and so I'm in the arms of my mother, and I can feel that, and then I can feel being in the light.
Yeah.
And it's.
I love that. I love it because
profound.
everybody agrees it's the same thing. In their mind, they can just sort of go right back there. It's that dream you had last night.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you had it 30 years ago, it's just like you had it last night, sort of thing. So the light, some people would call it God and source, and we have all kinds of possible names. You say it doesn't matter, whatever you want to call it, it's right. You call it the light, and you said at first it was spatially in front of you, and then it was all around you, and then you were within it. Mm-hmm. There's not much more else you can say about that, is there?
No, if you could imagine diving into the ocean and becoming liquid.
Yeah.
It's as though my skin didn't, there was no separation between my water skin and it. There was just no separation. Can you imagine? No separation. Boy, words just really limit me. But
yeah.
The experience of being immersed in love. So yes, sometimes I'll call it light. Sometimes it's liquid love, but it's pure bliss. Doesn't even come close to it.
Yeah.
But it's a tangible. I can feel it.
And maybe one of the biggest challenges probably for us humans, as physical beings, is not understanding the reality that we are that anyways. We're part of that anyways all the time, but we can't feel it the way you felt it. Wouldn't you say that's one of the greatest challenges of the human condition, the human experience?
Yes, I think one of the greatest challenges is not believing this illusion. That we are limited, that we are separate. That's the illusion, that we are not loved, that we are not worthy and accepted. To have even a momentary experience of the illusion dropping, the separation dropping, and to really feel even for a moment how overwhelmingly loved we are, changes you.
When you're in the tunnel, you described it as like a robin's egg blue. Is it? And you said it was opaque. So is it sort of translucent?
It was not opaque. It was opalescent.
Opalescent.
If you can imagine this kind of sparkly mother of pearl blue, beautiful.
Beautiful. And does it seem to go on and on and on type of a thing, or is there it's like a wall type of thing? Silly questions.
Well, no, you want to experience it. I understand. Yeah. I didn't touch it. I just.
Was there a smell to it? Was there a smell, an odor?
No, I didn't smell. I didn't have that sense open to me. Mm-hmm. Yep. But I did hear.
Right.
And I heard this music that was just incredible.
And this is where you heard the music, or did the music continue throughout the whole thing?
I would say I was aware of it in the tunnel.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that now. You found some music that reminds you of it?
Yes. So that was an interesting story. My husband and I were going into one of those nature stores, and we're walking in, and all of a sudden he turns to me and says, "What is wrong with you?" And I'm not feeling any distress. I said, "What? Nothing." And he said, "Well, big crocodile tears were rolling down my face." So I paused for a moment, and I listened, and I heard this music, and it had just washed over me and, triggered this response.
Yeah.
And I went up to the counter and I said, "What is that music?" And she told me. I bought it, and I have been using it ever since for the past 30 years. When I work with dying patients, when I'm doing some calming and healing exercises with them. And so, not surprisingly, the music is called Angels of Comfort.
All right, so something just occurred to me. So we were going to play it, and I just realized I put these on YouTube, and YouTube is like really against playing anybody else's music, okay? You have to have all kinds of rights and stuff. Let's just tell people how they could find this. They could probably go on iTunes or something like that. So it's called, what's it called again?
It's called Angels of Comfort, and the artist, I'm probably going to butcher his name, so forgiveness please, but it's Iasos, which is spelled IASOS. And I'm so sorry that we can't play this in the background, because it is so enveloping and almost as though you could just fall right into it.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's great. And most people will know how to look that up. And I'm sorry, too, because I was excited because we were going to do that. We were going to play that music. And then I just realized that YouTube might take it down if they found out about it. And we don't want that to happen either.
No,
for people
but
to miss out.
I use that music for my own meditation. I use that music all the time when I was going to see patients. And just as an example, I was working in a pediatric hospice in Virginia, and I would see children, and I would get calls in the middle of the night from mom who would say, "Donald is in excruciating pain. Can you get here?" And I'd say, "I'm on my way, but it's going to take me 20 minutes. Put on the music." Wow. And because I had used the music every time I was with these children, and they calmed and they we reduced their pain, they associated the music with reduced pain. And they would almost be in this, in a certainly an altered state by the time I got there.
That's amazing. If I find the music on iTunes or something, I will link to it below this video. So
that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll do that. And then, all right. So now we get into you're at one with the light, and you're told you have to go back.
Painful.
Yeah, I imagine. And you said earlier, and I don't think that I saw it anywhere else, but you just let us know that this voice came from the light. It was the light that told you to go back, not some other being, right?
No, I knew that.
Yeah, and yet, a little rebel that you are, you questioned it.
Yeah. Yes, I mean it was such a reaction to say no. And I wasn't saying no to my child, no to all of that. I was saying yes to this. I was saying yes to home, yes to love, yes to
And yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's just you when you're there, you understand that we're eternal beings, and so you see the human experience from a very different perspective,
yes.
that sort of a thing. I know that a lot of people have talked about this same thing who had young children, and it's one of the most difficult things that some of my audience members have tripped over, is understanding how could you leave your children behind. And so, I mean, you covered it a little bit at the beginning. So, but this is basically what it is seeing the human experience differently and knowing that life is eternal. And it's not like you're really, like you said earlier, not leaving them behind. It's not that situation, right?
No, it is why I didn't come back and share my story, though in part I could imagine me telling this story to mothers and they would have banned me from the neighborhood. How dare she? She doesn't deserve to be a mother. Yeah, when I was in the light and saying no, what I knew is that my child would be okay. My husband would be okay. It's all okay.
Yeah.
And also that I wasn't gone from them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
there's always that influence, that guidance, that love that steers us,
And that's, I think it's so important, the emphasis on this, because of the depth of it. Because, if you weren't leaving anybody, in terms of they were going to lose you physically, and then have to live without you physically for a certain period of time. If you didn't have that, it wouldn't have the same message that you have today to tell us about what you just said. The fact that you're always going to be there. And I mean, do you have I hear it a million times, but that a human life is like the blink of an eye type of a thing. Did you sort of have that perspective during this NDE?
I think I did, and the awareness of how important it is to use this time that we're given.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a blink of an eye, but yes, that knowing that there isn't separation between loved ones. Yeah. Again, that this is just an illusion, and here on Earth we have the fear, and I think that the fear creates the illusion.
Right.
And how differently we would live, how differently our experience would be here if we didn't have that fear.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
How different our decisions would be, our responses would be if we didn't have that fear.
Yeah. No question about it. I'm not sure it would still be the human experience if we didn't. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons having the human, the physical experience is so intriguing to souls, because they don't experience fear. We do. Mm-hmm. And that makes it a completely different experience.
Mm-hmm.
After you've said no a couple of times, and now you come back, and the same thing. You talk about this churning experience, like being in a blender. Mm-hmm. It sort of reminds me of the old Twilight Zones. It's like you're like spinning around. Next thing you know, you're in your body. Any more to say about that, or is it just it's very obvious, very fast experience? Boom, you're back in your body.
Yeah, I was aware that it was a fast experience, and again, with limited words, the best I can put it is feeling as though I was churning. So it was almost the opposite of this beautiful music that I heard in the tunnel, to hear, almost the sound of a blender coming back.
Wow, interesting.
Again, that may be my interpretation, but it was how I experienced it. Uh-huh.
And then you're back in your body, and I mean, what was that like? Because you had this allergic reaction. Was there any pain or anything involved, or?
No, there was no pain. What I did know now was the difference between being without a body and being just energy, and now being in this body. What happened was I had a real profound new experience of beyond appreciation, but a real awareness of how hard it is for us humans to be in this body, because it's like the comparison is like we're walking through mud. So it's difficult to be here. It's difficult to do the work. It's difficult to be in this body. We have limitations here. And so there was such an appreciation for every body, no matter what we were working with. And just a profound gratitude for people being here, because this is where we do so much work.
Yeah.
You
know, a lot of people are told they have to come back because they have work to do. I don't know, and obviously that means something different for everybody. Did you know what that meant, or was that something you had to discover?
No, I had to discover that. When I came back, my reaction was almost, talking to this, like, well, this better be good, Again, I suppose a little bit of the rebel in me, but this better be good, and feeling disoriented and confused about what in the world that could be, and that I couldn't make that happen. It almost, it wasn't up to me. I had to find it, or it had to find me. I don't know, but we found each other when I did read that newspaper, and the hospice story came up to me, and I was relieved. And I do know, in one capacity or another, in one venue or another, my work is to lower anxiety and fear, and to show a different way of being with the end of life. I am so grateful, profoundly grateful, to be invited in to the bedside of people at this last time here. Just a very, very sacred, intimate time, and I get to be with them.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's why I wrote the book, hopefully to change the dying person's experience at the end of their life, but also to tell families, loved ones, and professionals that we can make a difference at the end of life. We can do it differently. And some of that is how we bring ourselves to the bedside, and how we open ourselves without fear to being of service.
And that's where that, we so many people fear the death experience and therefore want to avoid it. And I'm talking about other people's, when they're dying, a lot of relatives and friends disappear. Right. And this teaches people how to wrap their minds. This book teaches people how to wrap their minds around what their loved ones are going through in the dying experience, so they understand it better. Education and understanding dissipates fear, but also teaches you the right and wrong ways of helping those people and walking them through it. And of course, we talked about this in the last interview, which people can watch below this video. But they, you were able to help your father through his dying experience, which is a beautiful story.
That was a full circle opportunity. So when I couldn't help my mother, when I didn't know what to do, and felt so distraught at not being able to participate with her at the end of her life, I was able to do that for my father, and it made all the difference in the world to him and to me.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful story. Just a couple last questions about it. So, through all your experience, you have such amazing experience in working in this field. So how would you say that near-death experiences help us face our own mortality, or that of our loved ones? I mean, it's documented in here, not necessarily in reference to the near-death experience, but your wisdom is in there. And a lot of it comes from all your experiences. How would you answer that question, though?
Well, first of all, I guess I would start by saying it's not my wisdom. It's the wisdom that was shared with me and from so many people who were willing to open themselves and talk about their experience.
Yeah.
But I hope that passing on the story of the near-death experience and other people's experience is that you may not have had this experience, but knowing that it's on the map, per se, gives you hope and is a roadmap to another way of just considering. Let's consider the possibility that death is not painful or separating. Let's just consider that. And if we consider it, perhaps we can go in and get closer to it. And by being closer to it, we we more fully participate. And when we participate, what we learn is that I can cope and I can make a difference. And it changes the experience. But the near-death experience, the best analogy that I have is that, 300 years ago, we did not know that Tahiti was on the map. And the first explorer who went to Tahiti came back and was ridiculed and disbarred from the Nautical Society or whatever. But as hundreds and hundreds of people found Tahiti in the same place and described it in similar words and described, how they felt and what happened to them as a result of going to Tahiti. Yeah. Whether you have ever seen Tahiti or not, you know now that it is on the map.
Yeah.
And perhaps and it can be your experience too.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's beautiful.
So when you're in the middle of the snow in Maine,
yeah,
you can close your eyes and know that there's a different place out there, and it too can be yours.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's beautifully said. And it's a great metaphor for life. I mean, you could use that in so many different ways.
Yes.
I love that. And it's true. And we're certainly not talking about hundreds of people here.
No.
I don't even know. Do you know the numbers?
Millions
of people. And I know so many of our viewers here on Afterlife TV have said that they've had a near-death experience.
From all over the world.
Yeah. And many of them, more than one. Yeah, all over the place. It's a shared experience. It's amazing that anybody's still questioning it, but that's what it is. That's okay if that's what they want to do.
Sure.
One last time, your website is drlanileary.com, right?
It is.
I got a link to it below. Doctor with DR, Lani Leary, Lanileary. You can link to that below. We'll have a link to the music below if we have it. The other interview that I did with you. Anything else you want to talk about as far as to promote?
Yeah, I want to remind people that your loved ones are not dead. They're just in another room, and the door is open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's true. Again, I recommend everybody read a book. No one has to die alone. Okay? One last look at it there. Sharing your experience with us is just amazing. I know a lot of people are going to love it and want to watch it more than once. Grateful to you for doing that with us. Thank you so much.
And grateful to you.
All right.
Thanks.
You take care of yourself, Lani.
Aloha.
Bye.
Bye.
That's all for another fantastic Afterlife TV episode. Bob couldn't be happier. If you enjoyed this episode as much as Bob, please leave a comment on AfterlifeTV.com, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. And don't forget to check out Bob's book, Answers About the Afterlife. Thanks for watching Afterlife TV.